Welcome everybody to another episode of The Lost Art of Conversation. This is Wrestling Edition, only edition so far. And we will be talking today about the evolution of wrestling. I am the J-Dogg, and once again I am joined by my buddy, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. JNW Boss. How you doing, boss man?
You know what it is. I'm pretty good. At least today anyways. But man, such is life. We move forward, and yes, I did pick this conversation.
You did.
Of reasons.
You did.
Yes, I did. I picked this one for a couple of reasons. First, I think it's always interesting to really kind of just go through history and see how a lot of stuff just evolve. I always think that's fascinating to me, whether it be gaming or even just our technology that we use in general. And also when it comes to professional wrestling, you can say that evolved in a tremendous way from its starts in the 1920s, 40s. You think you had
early on, man. The early 19th century, man. I mean, going back to one of our presidents, Abraham Lincoln was a wrestler, right? Can you imagine him in WWE today? The great emancipator. The great emancipator. I wonder what his finishing move would be,
I don't even want to know.
Anyway, but yeah, I mean, the actual pro wrestling as we know it today, or sports entertainment. I mean, God, get into that conversation again, just like our last episode. Anyway, I'm sure it'll come up some way, but that iteration of sports entertainment, pro wrestling, the kayfabe, the choreographed wrestling with purely performance instead of competition, that started, I believe, back in the 1920s, if I'm correct. That's where it went from the old freestyle Greco-Roman wrestling that was popular. Then it went into that. It went into more of that showmanship, choreographed wrestling, and they did it, traveling town to town and in these carnivals, hence the term carny, right? You're trying to con people, and a lot of people still didn't know it was fake, so you try to con them, into these quote-unquote fake fights and stuff. But then, started becoming popular, and the popularity, I think, declined during the era of World War II, if I'm correct. And then it was around the 50s, 40s to 50s that it started the golden age of wrestling, because television was invented. So, man, you can see this now, and wrestling was perfect for television. Perfect, because it's it's a squared circle, like they call it, right? A ring, two guys. You have it there, man. Perfect for television, and it started becoming big, and that's where it started evolving into more of the showmanship of it, with the very popular or infamous Gorgeous George. If any of you never heard of him, or look it up. I don't know if there should be some videos or some pictures of him, and he was just Gold Dust before Gold Dust, or Adrian Adonis was a incarnation of him after that, or even the Young Bucks now, the way that they're acting recently. So, yeah. So that so then there was another decline. It seems like wrestling always goes up and down. Another decline, but then into the should have been mid 1980s. Yeah, mid 1980s. 1980s it started with cable television. Then you had syndication, you had cable television, and then NWA started becoming big, and then you had WWE and Vince McMahon kind of buying everybody from all the territories, all the good wrestlers from all the territories, and he, became the conglomerate that he is now. So that started going off, and then, of course, there was a little decline, and then there was the whole Attitude Era and Monday Night Wars. But ever since then, it's been, I think, there hasn't been that next golden age. It was those two golden ages when television started in the 50s.
Wait, no.
Go ahead.
I'm not about to sit here and let you call it the name of the Ruthless Aggression Era. I'm not. I will refuse to take Ruthless Aggression Era slander.
Oh, Lord.
So,
is that hurting your feelings because that was your favorite era because you grew up with that?
I'm going to admit that, yes, but after the
man, great era. In-ring wrestling. I'm sorry.
Here's another thing that we're going to bring up.
Yeah.
Let's look at WWF specifically.
Mm-hmm.
We went from Hogan, next mainstream, and a lot of people say next and last mainstream star, Hogan.
Right.
Rock. Next to probably last mainstream star people say professional wrestling made was John Cena.
Yeah, and still not to the level of The Rock or a Hogan, but
No.
you know,
But last mainstream star you can say,
right?
definitely Cena. I mean, that's
Right.
definitely an argument. And he's banned from that Ruthless Aggression Era, so I refuse to take that slander here in this podcast.
Oh Lord. Well, what I'm saying is a golden era where it was like, it was revered by the masses, like it was during the Attitude Era, where you had, the Monday night competition, WCW Nitro, and that. I think that was the last, and I don't even think that was a golden era, but I guess we could call it maybe the third golden era, because it's mostly the 50s when television started, and then when WWF started doing their thing with sports entertainment, and then in the 80s Hulk Hogan went on, and wrestling became really big. That was the second golden age. So fine, we'll say, the Ruthless Aggression Era was on the outside of it's still that golden age. It was still capitalizing off that golden age of the third golden age with the Monday Night Wars, right? And that was a product of that.
Yeah, it was still, I think to me it was still like kind of, to me, I'm opinion, probably biased aside, but
of course,
to me,
you always are.
But to me, I think Ruthless Aggression is still up there as far as like from a wrestling standpoint, and when wrestling was still cool. Because if you really think when there were people who dropped off after the Attitude Era, which people argue to this day whether 2001 or whether 2002. I think it was 2001 if you ask me, but okay.
I would say 2000. I think 2000. I would say 2002. 2001 was the ending of the Attitude Era. I would say, if I'm correct, that was WrestleMania 17, which I think WrestleMania 17 was a culmination maybe of that, and then even up to WrestleMania 18, where you had Hogan versus The Rock, that was still kind of the remnants of the Attitude Era. But I would say 17 was maybe with that the Rock versus Austin.
Hawk.
Yeah, Hawk. God bless you. That Rock versus Austin main event WrestleMania 17 with Vince McMahon, that he turned on. Well, he didn't turn. He just helped Stone Cold Steve Austin, and they aligned. I think that kind of killed the Attitude Era that in that match. You don't think so?
Yeah. Yeah, no. Because like the whole Attitude Era was practically kind of built. Everything to a certain extent was kind of built off the back of Hogan versus McMahon in some way, shape, form, or fashion.
You mean Austin versus McMahon?
Right. Wait, what did I say?
I think you said Hogan.
Oh, sorry.
Unless I heard it incorrectly. It doesn't matter.
I'm sorry. Whatever. Austin McMahon, and so then after that, I can see that. Right,
and then that's when they left after, I think Rock and Austin kind of left around the same time. The Rock would come back, but he was part-time a lot, but it was around 2000. Then, 2002 was WrestleMania 18, and then 19 was where The Rock and Austin had their last match. So from there, I would say the Ruthless Aggression Era just took off, man, because then you had the next year, WrestleMania 20, and that's when Batista and John Cena... Oh, and we're having technical difficulty. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back after some technical difficulties. I think Bossman is back. You're back, right, sir?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Well, let me correct myself before we had the technical difficulties. I was starting to say that Cena and Batista were crowned champions at WrestleMania 20, when indeed it was WrestleMania 21. WrestleMania 20, we were still... And WrestleMania 20 was 2003. WrestleMania 21 was 2004. I always look at the Ruthless Aggression Era starting then, 21, when it was Batista and Cena crowned. But I forget that Randy Orton and Brock Lesnar were a big part of the Ruthless Aggression Era. So Brock Lesnar won the title in WrestleMania 19. So yeah, we could say it started back then. Anyway, and then we had Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit were those two big players in the Ruthless Aggression Era as well, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Okay, so I don't know if you wanted to touch on that. I'm fine. Everything I looked up, I was looking things up too online, see what our wonderful internet says, and they all were saying that it seems like the consensus is that the Ruthless Aggression Era started in 2002, which that would be WrestleMania 18, when it was Hogan versus Rock and main event Jericho, and so it was the whole Austin and Rock versus the NWO and Jericho and Triple H. So I guess that's when the Ruthless Aggression Era started. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that would be pretty accurate. That would be pretty accurate. But the general point that I'm going to make, bringing up the Ruthless Aggression Era, if we're talking about, since we were kind of talking about these big stars and stuff, I was going to say, kind of got to throw Cena on that list. For real. I mean, even though it was kind of the reason a lot of people stepped away from the business at the same time.
Yep.
That's a good point, too. But in general, the one thing that you kind of notice throughout all different types of eras is the in-ring quality. And it really stuck out to me because I remember a while ago, this guy here wanted me to watch WrestleMania 8. Was it?
WrestleMania 8, yeah, you're right, yeah, WrestleMania 8.
Yeah. And me being this was way before my time.
Yeah.
And
when I was a kid.
Me being a growing up with that Ruthless Aggression Era, which is why I'm not taking that slander in here. Me growing up on the Ruthless Aggression Era. I know, I will. me growing up with the Ruthless Aggression Era, and now seeing the in-ring work of modern wrestling, it surprised me, admittedly, to go back to WrestleMania 8 and realize that I was actually enjoying the stuff I was seeing with Brett and Piper. I think I even like Michael then Tatanka when that happened.
Yes, and Macho Man Randy Savage versus Ric Flair. They had a good world title match, and then of course you had the spectacle of Psycho Sid versus Hulk Hogan, which it was what it was. But, but damn you, Papa Shango. You know the story of that, right? What happened there?
Yeah, he missed his cue.
He missed his cue. He was supposed to come in and Sid just kicked out of the leg, man. And I was such a big Sid fan that I popped, man, when he kicked out of that leg.
But the point is, when they're making us, that you go from and the ring down back then was way different than what we're there now. And it's like, yeah, you have some guys who were doing some athletic stuff, like I think Shawn Michaels did.
Shawn Michaels did, yeah. Macho Man was a high flyer as well. He could move around in that ring, yeah. You can argue. Bret the Hitman Hart did his thing. I mean, he wasn't a high flyer or anything like that, but he was. Right. Yeah, Bret Hart was interesting. He was a combination of old school going into new school. He wasn't Hulk Hogan. He wasn't the big guy, but he wasn't a high flyer either. He wasn't Shawn Michaels or Kenny Omega now, or the Young Bucks. We talk about them all the time, or Jericho, but yeah.
But it was crazy to me that seeing stuff like an elbow drop was impressive back then.
Right.
Now an elbow drop is just a standard
It's just an elbow drop. You're right.
It's just an elbow drop. Axe handles even. Diamond axe handle.
Right. That's you know what? That's a big thing, man. And I want to get into if we could get into that, because the in-ring work, I would love to touch on that, the evolution of that, and you touched it right there. But just to finish us off, first of all, with the Ruthless Aggression Era, I think that the Ruthless Aggression Era brought some of the best in-ring. Since we're talking about in-ring, that'll transition to that. Some of the best in-ring performances and matches were during that era, man. I just remember, I mean, you talk about Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels was the guy that started kind of the Attitude Era, and then he got hurt, so Stone Cold ran with it. But Shawn Michaels and DX kind of started that thing, right? The Attitude Era, along with the NWO. So the whole clique started that Attitude Era shift. And then Shawn Michaels, though, was a huge player in the Ruthless Aggression Era. Huge.
Yes, actually.
I mean, he had great matches with, they talk about WrestleMania, him and Jericho stole the show that year. You had Shawn Michaels and Kurt Angle. Who could ever forget that?
21.
Then he was involved in that triple threat with Chris Benoit and Triple H, and then you started the Undertaker match. I think that came later, though. Was that still Ruthless, or that was a little after? Okay. But still, he was a big player there. And then you had Kurt Angle, who had tremendous matches. You had Randy Orton, who was great in the ring. You still had Jericho around. And it's
Triple H.
Triple H was doing his thing. He was great in the ring. I think that was in his peak. Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit. Then you start getting Edge, right? Like the big. We talked about the 8 or what was it? The SmackDown 6. You had all these, Rey Mysterio putting on great matches. You had great in-ring work. But you know what's interesting? In that era, we had this great in-ring work. Maybe I could can we both agree some of the best or the best in-ring work and best matches, technical matches, wrestling matches that we've seen ever? Can we agree on that?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because honestly, if you think about great matches, some of the matches that pop up from some of these names that we mentioned, like Kurt Angle, Shawn Michaels, Undertaker's another one.
All right, we didn't mention him. He was great in the ring too. Absolutely.
some of those matches that we still remember and talk about to this day did come from the Ruthless Aggression Era.
Right, and my point I was trying to make, the funny thing with that, or the irony in that, is that you said a lot of people got turned off in that era because of who? John Cena, and because they did not like his in-ring, he could not wrestle, right? Quote unquote, I know he can wrestle, but quote unquote, you can't wrestle chance, and a lot of traditionalists and a lot of people who like the in-ring work, a lot of people started watching.
I think that's the most disrespectful chamber you can point at a wrestler.
You can't wrestle? And he ran with it, man. I mean, kudos to him because he ran with it and he still did his thing. But it's just interesting to me, an era with so much great wrestling, technical wrestling, and great wrestling matches, and all those guys that could wrestle in the ring. The guy that was maybe the worst wrestler of them, let's put it that way, quote unquote, became the biggest star of that era. And then you even throw Batista in there. Batista wasn't the greatest wrestler either. He was a throwback to the Hogan era, so he was a big dude. He could do some things, but he was another big dude, big muscles. So it was funny that those two guys are kind of the face of that era. Along with, I would say, Brock Lesnar and Kurt Angle, who could, wrestle in the ring, who could go. So maybe they carried that part.
Could you also, but could you also argue? I mean, let's look at kind of the lineage of WWE and WWF and the guys that they typically had at the top of the card.
Right.
Hogan, we just mentioned it. Bret was there for a little bit.
Then Michaels. That's when they went kind of. That's when they said, okay, let's give these guys a shot, and That was because of the whole steroid era thing. So Hogan went away, and then they said, hey, these guys are great wrestlers, the people are buying it, let's go with this. And they did that for a while, but they stuck Kevin Nash in there as soon as they had a chance. He was still, no, he wasn't that green, but he was not big known, and they rushed him in, and they went, oh, okay, he's big, he's getting a little over, let's get that big guy again and get the title off of Bret, so.
Yeah. And again, like, when it comes to, like your Batista and Cena and stuff, it was crazy that people who argue that they weren't the best. And admittedly, I'm a massive Ruthless Aggression Era fan, but I can go back and look and say Batista's time as world champ on SmackDown, he did not do much with it, to tell you the honest truth, before he got hurt. Because he had like a couple of matches with JBL, had his rivalry started with Eddie Guerrero, but then Eddie unfortunately passed away, so we couldn't really fully get the finish of that. But,
right.
And then he got injured in like early 2006. So the SmackDown run, I can see why people got turned off by it. But like wrestling-wise, you could argue it was probably like the peak. It took the, that crash course TV element of the Attitude Era.
Right.
Improved the in-ring work.
Focus more on wrestling. Era. Yeah, it was focusing more on wrestling. We talk about, again, the difference between pro wrestling, sports entertainment. I think that was interesting because it was that pro wrestling element that got the Ruthless Aggression Era so over and people love it. But then again, at the same time, the dude on top of that came out of that, as you said, the big star was John Cena, a sports entertainer through and through. No professional wrestler, a sports entertainer through and through. And I'm going to ask you this question. Going back to after the Hulk Hogan era, where it started declining, I believe in 1993 to 95, 96, before the Attitude Era, and that peak there between the Hogan years and the Attitude Era, right? You had guys like Bret Hart, then you had Bret Hart was carrying it for a bit, then you had Shawn Michaels carrying it for a bit, and even though the ratings were low, not a lot of people were watching wrestling after the whole steroid thing, but the wrestling fans were still there watching. As myself, I was still into it, and Shawn Michaels was carrying it, man. Shawn Michaels was having these kick-ass matches as world champion every single month on pay-per-view. Bret Hart was doing it before him, so those guys,
quality-wise, those two were having better matches than Hogan?
Oh, absolutely, of course. So they were having these.
Your question.
Yeah, they were having these great matches. Can you imagine, though, because I'm just saying, the Ruthless Aggression Era, John Cena came out of that as a big star. Did he ride the coattails? We had all these kick-ass matches with Michaels, Kurt Angle, Undertaker, all these guys that we mentioned, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did they make that era what it was, and then John Cena kind of like reaped the benefits of it and said, okay, I'm just going to run as the leader of it because I have this appeal to the masses, but he ran off of that. What would John Cena have done if he had the supporting cast, let's put it that way? It's like a big player. Like if you had Michael Jordan didn't win championship until Pippen got there and they filled the team up, right? Talking about the Chicago Bulls back in the day.
Right.
LeBron didn't win any championships, so he joined up with Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh. I'm talking basketball now. Shawn Michaels back then was like LeBron James on the Cleveland Cavaliers, leading a team of nobodies to the championship. So Shawn Michaels ran with that championship and, was that guy and was keeping them afloat, man. You talk about the greatness of John Cena, but could John Cena have done that if he didn't have the supporting cast? What would wrestling be if he didn't have the supporting cast that he did, and he had to be in Michael's shoes where he's carrying it? Would they still see him as the big time star that he is? Take that, John Cena fans.
Wow. Dang, that's good. No. I would say no. Because I want you to think about the guy that Cena had his, and this is no disrespect. I want you to really think about the guy that Cena. Let's start with his WWE Championship reign. That's really when people started to say, okay, Cena's at the top of the company now when he won the WWE Championship.
When he beat JBL in that crappy match. Go ahead. A Hogan-esque match, if I've ever seen one. Cena was up on top at the beginning. JBL beat the hell out of him throughout the match. He made his comeback. Boom, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, sure.
Drop the leg, brother.
Pretty much. But they did follow up nicely, though, with their I Quit match. I mean,
that was good.
Their I Quit match was excellent.
That was good.
But then from there, if he didn't have matches with guys like a Chris Jericho and a Christian,
right?
If he didn't have matches with guys like a Kurt Angle, he had like several matches with Kurt Angle, I think.
Right, he did. They built him up.
Right, and if he didn't have an Elimination Chamber match concept to work around with guys like Kane, Michael, say what you want about Masters and Carlito, I guess.
Oh, they were great.
And then
what
happened after? Carlito was good.
I love Carlito.
Champion,
No.
But like without those guys, Triple H.
And then I was going to say that. Then he went on to WrestleMania to face Triple H. Triple H tapped out to him.
Yeah. So if
2 years in a row, man. Triple H and Michaels.
Yeah, right.
2 years in a row. Triple H and Michaels. They both biggest stars, you would say, of leading from the Attitude Era to that were still there. Besides the Undertaker, they both tapped out to him 2 WrestleManias in a row.
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't think about that. Right. But
talk about a supporting cast.
Then I don't think Cena at that time could have did it or would have did it for the WWE.
Right.
And then so I think wrestling would have been in a completely different spot now.
Man.
Honestly.
Yeah, I would wonder how it would have evolved from there, because it was already like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the in-ring work would have been fine, but would they have had that top guy or that one guy, or would it have just been fine being the way that it was, just having Angle as champion, having Brock Lesnar as champion, Randy Orton, and swapping the title between those guys, and maybe the old dudes like Shawn Michaels and Triple H? Would it still be fine? It would have been the Ruthless Aggression Era regardless.
I think it is hard to think. It's crazy that a timeline potentially could have existed of us not having the top guys that we had in those spots, and Cena being the main guy to do it, or a Ruthless Aggression Era without thinking about John Cena. It's crazy to think about that.
Right, but imagine that point like that. If he would have went to that era, and not even that, I'll put him back another era, because Hulk Hogan, you could say, had a great supporting cast in his days. He had the guys like Macho Man Randy Savage, Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. He had Ted DiBiase later. He had guys who could go in the ring and make him look really good and sell for him.
Right.
So he did have a great supporting cast. But Hogan was Hogan, man. Hogan was the leader, and everybody knew that Hogan was. If you take out Hogan from that era and you have that supporting cast, that era is not as big as it is.
That's a good point.
Right? But we just did that with John Cena. We just took out John Cena, and we're just like, this era's still good, man. We got Brock Lesnar, we got Kurt Angle, we got all these guys, we got Randy Orton, we got guys who can, who we can roll with, and it would have still been the same thing. So my point,
even if it was just Batista by himself, even you can argue.
Right.
Even if it was just Batista by himself.
Right. And that's my thing. It's like, I get John Cena that's the reality of it, became the star. But if you analyze it in that way, my opinion that I was never a Cena fan, and I think that John Cena is not that good, man. I'm sorry. I'll say, I know people say John Cena. I was never a fan of the guy. I respect now what he's done, and we can have a conversation back and forth. And I think we've had it off here where we talked about John Cena. And is he as bad of a wrestler as people say he is? No, he's not. He knows what he's doing in the ring. He just looks awkward doing it. But he knows how to tell a story in a ring. He knows how to captivate a crowd with his mic work, and mostly, the kids and people who like a lot of the cheesy stuff that he does. And what makes him work is that he's in on the joke. He's in on the joke. He knows, kind of like Hogan back in the days, over the top. He knew it was way over the top. He knows he wasn't coming across as a serious dude. So he's in on it. I'll give him that. I don't hate him as a person, but I never really liked. I was never a fan of him. Never thought that he was that good, and that's why I never thought about this before until right now. This was not, I didn't think about this before we got on this, but when we were on that break from the technical difficulty, I said, man, let me ask him what he would think about that if we take out Cena. And it's just, man, you plug him into these areas, you plug him into like a John Cena, into that era as Hogan. Is that era as big? Is he as big as Hogan? And do you put him into the, you put him into that little era where Shawn Michaels had to carry everybody? Man, can he carry the company by himself like Shawn Michaels did?
I don't think he could.
It's like, whoa.
Maybe Cena stuff could work in the Attitude. Now, here's the thing.
I think he would have thrived in the Attitude Era.
Worked in the Attitude Era.
I think he would have.
If he stuck with his doctor of thugonomics.
Right. Maybe evolved it a little bit and made it a little bit more, a little more ruthless, or a little more over the top as it was, No, he did his thing. That was entertaining. I used to enjoy that. It was funny.
That could have worked.
I enjoy the thugonomics.
Let's kind of bounce back to the in-ring work. I mean, we kind of started talking about Cena because we were talking about that particular era. From Ruthless Aggression Era forward, I think one of the reasons people got kind of sick of WWE, well, because if you really think about it, it took, and you can still argue, WWE still kind of has that same, we mentioned before, tagline style from, like, you can argue probably Ruthless Aggression Era forward with their stuff, to me, in my opinion. Or at least,
what was that style?
Basically, you work your match. Dang it! To sit.
I think what you're saying. If I'm catching you correctly, because you're saying it started off with, and what I saw during the Ruthless Aggression Era, what started more was guys starting to, like you said. I mean, I think it was always focused on hitting your finishing move.
Right.
But back in the day, I mean, you hit your finishing move, you were done. Like, you went home. Like, Hogan hit that leg drop, you're done. Macho Man hit that elbow, you're done. Ted DiBiase applied the $1 Million Dream, you're done. The game's over. And so that's why when somebody like Macho Man would hit that elbow and Hogan would kick out, oh man, that led to that big comeback and people were into it. Ruthless Aggression Era, what you're saying is maybe they were built up to that finishing move, but then a lot of guys started then kicking out of their finishing moves. Am I correct to that? No, like they started kicking out of finishing moves, having to do, especially if it's a big show.
Yeah. Big show wise, they would build up to that finisher. They would hit it, and then I think the problem is now, bingo, you kind of helped me out there. Thank you.
No problem.
The thing is you're right. The saying has always been about, building to that finishing move,
right.
And I think my problem is now that it's come to a thing to kick out of. It turned into the thing to be, kicked out of, and I'm referring to kind of the action in the middle portions of the match as well. It's definitely. You can argue modern day WWE, sometimes it can be a bit slower and seems almost non-important until you get to that finish.
So you think it kind of evolved backwards a little bit? Because during my day, and I'm saying my day, this is back in the late 80s, 90s, when I was a kid watching, so back then it was a lot slower. Like you had guys like Shawn Michaels when he was part of the Rockers, or Bret Hart, and those guys like having Owen Hart when it was the Blue Blazer, and then as Owen Hart, like doing these crazy stuff back then, like you said, back then right. the crazy stuff was, oh my God, he threw a drop kick from the top rope. Wow, like that's amazing, right. If a guy started doing a moonsault, that was just out of this world. Like, oh my God, this is the most athletic guy ever. Now you see guys doing moonsaults everywhere, and from every angle. Yeah. So it has gone, and maybe we're going a little too forward, but it has gone now how wrestling is a lot more athletic. But I think during the Ruthless Aggression Era, we saw that athleticism just highlighted. It went from the Hogan era to the Attitude Era, where we had guys that were athletic. We had the Hardys doing their thing. We had Edge and Christian, putting on those matches. You saw Shawn Michaels do his thing. Then you saw Chris Jericho during the Attitude Era do that as well. But it was still about Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, and then Undertaker, all great wrestlers, but it wasn't this athleticism as it is now.
Right.
And then I think during the Ruthless Aggression Era, with guys like Kurt Angle, with guys like Randy Orton, with guys like Rey Mysterio, Brock Lesnar, a big dude who could be so athletic, you know, and it's like it became that athleticism led to like these matches. That's why Ruthless Aggression just led to these matches that you felt like were it made you suspend that disbelief and be like, man, some of this stuff could be real. Like especially if it's again, I know you hate this word, but a casual wrestling fan or someone who's not in on it, they could maybe see, wow, these guys are, you know, fighting for real. Yeah, these guys are going at it. So I think it became that where the Attitude Era was still, they were doing this ruthless stuff, but that athleticism wasn't there. And that started the evolution. I think Ruthless Aggression Era started that evolution towards more athleticism. Now, let's revert to what we were talking about, the moves, right? The moves, them kicking out of finishing moves. I mean, is there a way that could have been preserved, or is this just the natural progress of wrestling where it's like, okay, what else could we do? We already had a guy kick out of a move once. Now we have to get guys kick out of a move twice or even 3 times, or everybody kicking out of each other's moves, you know?
This could have been preserved. I feel something like that could have been preserved.
So you think it hurts the business now? That new style hurts?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You don't do it on a TV match.
Right.
My take, you don't do it on a TV match. Save it for a pay-per-view. Save it for, save it for a pay-per-view. Save it for, your big title match. You don't do that on TV. And so now it's to a point, bringing it forward to modern day here. WWE kind of helped bring this to light, but you bring it forward now. Sometimes, you hit one finisher and it's like, oh, okay, they're going to kick out of there. Especially if you're watching a pay-per-view now.
Right.
You're watching the pay-per-view, oh, they hit a finisher. I know they're going to kick out of that.
Right, exactly. Where it should be a rarity, and it should be like, oh, he hit his finisher. Man, this match could be over. Like, this match should be over. Oh my God, he kicked out. He kicked out of the AA, or he kicked out. Not like when they're trying to build up. I'll put this example: when they brought in Kevin Owens from NXT, and they're trying to build him up. They did a great job with his promo with Cena. They did a great job with him attacking Cena. Then you get to the match, they have a good match, but that, I think, solidifies your point of this. Of where it went through the Ruthless Aggression Era, and then it became that where it's like, I think Kevin Owens kicked out of 2 or 3 AAs. I think he kicked out of a Super AA too from the top rope before Cena beat him in one of those matches. I think it was, I don't know if it was Money in the Bank or one of the matches they had. I remember him kicking out of one from the top rope as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I that part I immediately can't remember, but
well, and then you had Roman Reigns recently kick out of a Super AA too, so it's like, and then even that, they're building up Roman Reigns, but you'll have, I think, did Cena kick out of a spear too, or they're kind of protecting that a little more? No,
guys, they're protecting the spear a little bit more.
Yeah, but guys kicked out. I think the Demon kicked out of it recently.
Yeah,
which that's fine. I didn't have that big of a problem with that, but yeah, I get what you're saying, man. To me, I think I'm on your side. I think finishing moves should be preserved more. That's been part of that evolution of it, and I get it, because it's like, oh, what else can we do? It's like, we have a ladder. What else can we do? Well, let's bring in 2 or 3 ladders. Oh, what can we do now? Let's bring in tables. Let's bring, it's always like, oh, we have a cage. A cage is not big enough. Let's have Hell in a Cell. Wait, what about we expand on that and have an Elimination Chamber? It's still a cage match, at the end. So I get that, but where?
Let's expand on
but
the
you can throw all
chamber.
that.
Let's have a Punjabi.
Oh Lord!
Never mind.
Oh Lord! So I guess my question is like, when is enough enough? Sometimes you have to preserve like the integrity, I guess, of the quote unquote sport and the integrity of it, and be like, damn, like. Let it be what it is and preserve these things, and they can still go back to that. It will take a while, but they can still go back to preserving some of these finishing moves. And that's why I really like what Kenny Omega does with that one wing angel. Nobody kicks out of that. Nobody. He's like, I'm not allowing these people. I'll lose a match, but I'm not going to have these people. He's lost matches in Japan and in AEW.
You can reverse it all you want.
You can reverse it all freaking day, but I'm not going to hit it and have you kick out of the one wing angel. And I'm sure when it happens, the day that someone kicks out of that one wing angel, it's gonna be unbelievable. It's gonna be like, oh my God, this guy kicked out of the one wing angel, and it's gonna be, and we need more of that. And I don't know if you want to say anything else about the moves, because I wanted to also transition and maybe talk with that. Talk about how, and hold on, now I lost my train of thought.
Oh, no, I can help you out a bit. Hold on.
Go ahead.
So
We'll keep rolling, man. This is live. Go ahead.
Something I was going to mention there. You mentioned kind of preserving.
Right.
I mean, yeah, preserving moves. For instance, we kind of mentioned it earlier, or we mentioned it a while ago. An elbow drop used to be super impressive.
Yeah, there you go.
Now it's just a move. Super kick. Right. Super impressive. Super cool.
Right.
Now it's a common spot. The Canadian Destroyer.
Oh, before a pile driver used to be
transition move. Right. Oh, yeah, let's talk about that
before a pile driver used to be a finish. It was outlawed.
A storyline off of that.
It was outlawed. I think back in the 80s or 90s or something, they outlawed the pile driver for a while. You know, I think it was in WCW or something. They outlawed the pile driver. People get disqualified for using it, and then WWE stopped using it for a while, too.
And they brought it back.
And then they brought it back, but I love the pile driver, one of my favorite old moves. But that was a big move. And now, and again, that was the finishing move of Mr. Wonderful, Paul Orndorff. I think that was his finishing move back in the 80s. And now, like you said, now it's not just a pile driver. Now you get the Canadian Destroyer.
Or you get Petey Williams.
You get, yes, Petey Williams, man, shout out. Or you get Adam Cole with his Panama Sunrise, right? So, yeah, you have that. And then you got guys kicking out of that. And those moves aren't even as big as a normal pile driver was back in the day.
And the tombstone, now the fact that it's scaring me that it looks like the tombstone's about to be added to that list, and I'm not okay with it. Like, there was a spot, I think it was like a leaping tombstone off the middle rope between Sammy Guevara and MJF. I'm like, please, let's not make this a common thing. Please. Please don't.
Well, I mean, The Undertaker's retired, so I don't know, but okay. Is there a way? Let me ask you this then: is there a way? I agree with you, and that's the evolution of wrestling has been that the moves, an elbow is just an elbow, a sleeper is just a people used to finish people off with a sleeper. You hardly see that now. I love that Roman Reigns brought some of that back. Like he's finished off people with a side freaking headlock. I love that, love it. Besides, he has the guillotine, right? That's his other submission move.
Yeah, that's the guillotine. Yeah.
Can you? Could that have been prevented? Because you're saying we could have preserved the finishing move, and I think they could still do that. Kenny Omega still does that, and they can preserve some other moves that they've tried to preserve. But can you do that with regular move when these guys are doing so much more athletic stuff? How can you sell just a regular pile driver?
That you can't. I think a regular pile driver can still work given the general impact. But stuff like a normal elbow, okay, that can still. I mean, you mentioned guys are doing more athletic stuff to a point where a simple elbow drop is really just going to be looked at as a simple elbow drop now. So, I mean, that really just ties into the athleticism of the business and how more athletic people are. So some of these moves were going to kind of just fade out over time. Especially given just, again, how more athletic these guys are. And you can also add the element of mixed martial arts in the fold. So now you got people doing these.
The popularity of that rising, the popularity of that rising, that brings it in, yeah.
So now you got people doing these therapeutic clutches, these Kimura locks, all this other stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if I see someone hit an omoplata at some point. But you got all these, submission moves that regular sleeper hold while still cool. Isn't as cool as some of this other stuff that's being brought to the game. Even the guillotine, for instance. So some of these moves you wouldn't have been able to preserve. Still cool, but you still wouldn't have been able to preserve them as much. Speaking of preserve, I keep saying that word a lot. Can we talk about how some of these guys, I think really this is kind of a good transition to modern day here. Can we talk about how some of these guys need to preserve their bodies and not kill themselves?
Man, we went from... They stopped doing chair shots to the head for a while, and I think they still kind of shy away mostly from it because of things with like Mankind. So you had WWE kind of be on the safe side with some of these things, bringing that aggression down from the Attitude Era and Ruthless Aggression and all this blood all the time. Like, I'm cool with that, man. Like, that's something that is okay if it evolves that way, just like a lot of people don't like the evolution of football. Oh, these guys can't hit each other anymore. They're wusses now. They're soft. I'm like, dude, why do you want these guys to die? Like, I can still enjoy football the way it is and enjoy the strategy behind it, and they're still hitting each other really hard. But, come on, man. We're not going to go back to when they were wearing leather helmets on or no helmets, and, this isn't rugby. Let them let those rules be in place for a reason, man. That's for people's health. Like, stop being a barbarian and a Neanderthal and think that way. Again, my opinion.
Right.
You could have yours if you want, but I just think that way. I'm okay with that evolution, just like I'm okay with the evolution of wrestling in that way. But you're right. Now the way that they're doing it is these flips, and I'm surprised that they don't get hurt more than they do. Explain that to me. Like, I'm surprised they do not get hurt as much as they do.
I am too. I am too, and it's like
testament to their athleticism, man. And like,
it is. It's quite, and the cooperation.
Whoa.
But aside from the athletic stuff, because I think if you got the cooperation and you got the know-how, then you can pull this athletic stuff off.
Right.
I'm talking about some of just the general spots we be seeing, like the stuff on the apron. Darby Allin. I still can't believe the dude got tossed on a freaking ramp in a bag full of thumbtacks. Like,
that's crazy.
Like there's like a level of you are about to hardcore wrestling. Mm-hmm. Now we got the deathmatch. The deathmatch style was popular way back then.
Oh, way back, man. Cactus Jack having them in Japan with all these crazy Japanese wrestlers, and then ECW doing their thing in hardcore wrestling. Yeah.
Right. But can we say even now it's gotten a bit too much? Like, syringes to the cheek.
Oh, wow. Well, where did we see that?
CZW.
Okay, well, yeah, that's why I don't watch that garbage, but so I don't count it as I'm sorry, I don't count that as wrestling. All these hardcore and backyard stuff, like, that's been there for a long time, and they try to be ECW. ECW knew what they were doing. They had the hardcore wrestling, but there were still good wrestling matches. They still had great athletes doing it, and there were stories and stuff, so it's not this crazy
so you don't even count that
bullshit that I don't count. I'm sorry, that's my opinion too, but I do not count that. If I'm wrong, please tell me and try to convince me, but I don't see that as, I know that what's his name, John Moxley came from there, right, and other guys, but I don't know, man. That's to me, that's not anything that has evolved. Like, we've had barbarianism since we were like the beginning of time, and that's not evolving. That's staying being a Neanderthal barbarian with stuff. So I don't know. I
want to at least try. Whether you think it's wrestling or not, I still kind of want to touch on it a little bit.
Sure,
got a point with ECW, but ever since then, people have been trying to be the next ECW as far as the hardcore stuff is concerned.
Wow.
CZW was kind of known for a lot of their crazier stuff.
I've seen some of it. It's
they're
crazy.
Buck wild, like, and no human being should be doing this type of stuff. And so now, for the deathmatch crowd, how far is too far? What more do people got to do for you to get your fix? Getting hit with a light tube is pretty bad, but now is kind of commonplace, even though it's still painful to watch. It's still kind of commonplace.
Like, thumbtacks, get out of here. That's nothing. That's like taking a regular suplex, right?
Nowadays, you can argue into that match world.
Lord.
When it comes to this deathmatch stuff, like, how much is too much? When it comes to hardcore wrestling, how much is...
You know when it's going to be too much? When somebody dies, or when a few people start dying from doing it. Then it'll be. If not, they'll keep pushing the envelope.
That ain't the case. Let's talk about Nick Gage. I don't know if you seen that new documentary. He literally practically died for like a certain number of minutes.
Right. Oh my God. Yeah.
Came back
to life. He's a zombie. He's a zombie now. It's a Walking Dead.
Right. But it didn't stop the popularity of deathmatch wrestling.
Right. And I guess that's what you were saying. It's kind of like that evolution too of the moves. Like, okay, we can't go back to just a suplex being one of the last moves that you hit. That's something you're hitting late in the match. Like a suplex is now just a regular old thing, and a drop kick is in a drop kick from the top rope, not a big thing. A moonsault is not you're not going to beat anybody with that. So, so that's the evolution. So the same thing with hardcore. Like, if you keep hitting a guy just with thumbtacks, the audience for that is going to demand more. They're going to want to see more because they've seen that so many times.
Right.
And that's the thing of, like you said, preserving finishes and preserving some of these moves. It's like, make these things mean, and I maybe want to wrap up this thing of the moves, but make these moves mean something. And even in AEW, we've seen guys like Jim Ross. I think he talked about it on his podcast or on another podcast, and Jericho as well. How they're trying to tell these younger guys, dude, like, start making your moves mean a little more. It's okay to slow down a little bit. make these moves mean something. It doesn't mean that we're going backwards. We could still do some crazy stuff. We could do that, but make it mean something. You know, make it mean something in the match where it's hit at a good spot, where you hit it, at a good spot, and the guy kicks out at 2.5. You know, you're doing a big move, not something that just you're gonna hit a big move and then go right into another one and right into another one. There's no pin. So it's a lot of that storytelling in the ring that, with the in-ring action, I've had a little bit of a problem with it. I'm not that old school. Like, I get the new school, and I like the back and forth, and we've talked about this before. I enjoy the back and forth more instead of that old formula where the bad guy just beats up the good guy for a long time. He makes his comeback. Yeah. I like the back and forth. It's exciting, but make it mean something, and I think the Ruthless Aggression did a great job of that. They didn't just follow that formula all the time. They did the back and forth thing, you know. Kurt Angle, Undertaker. You told me to watch that match. Fantastic. You know, Randy Orton in his matches.
I was hoping you watched that match.
Yeah. And Chris Benoit did that, and Eddie and Shawn Michaels. Like, they got to the point where they would go back and forth. Kurt Angle versus Shawn Michaels. Perfect example of that. It wasn't just one of them being the bad guy and beating the other guy the whole time. It was like a contest. It was like an MMA fight. It was like an actual competition and back and forth. I have no problem with that, as long as you do it like Michaels and Angle, where you're still telling a story and these moves means something, and when you hit a big move or something, you take your time. You sell it. You know, I can't just be. Sometimes I see it, and these guys are getting hit with move after move, and NXT was guilty of this too. I'm not just going to put AEW because NXT was guilty. Guys get hit, boom, move after move. You know, last shot, this, a Panama Sunrise to Gargano on the floor. Gargano's up 2 seconds later, 2 minutes later, whatever, in the ring doing crazy shit. Like, come on, man. You know, make it make a little sense, though. Make it make a little sense. That's my problem with the evolution of that. Like, fine, you want to take it and do these new moves. You're not going to use a pile driver to finish somebody off. You're not going to use these because you're evolving. Fine. But slow a little bit down and take that time, you know, where you have new school and new stuff, but make it mean something and make it sell, man. Sell, you know?
And again, you know,
I'm sorry, I got a little passionate there. I'm sorry.
No, it's cool. That is, you know, again, like some of the apron stuff. Like, goodness, can we kind of go back to when apron spot meant? Oh, why did you do that? Why did you take it that far? You know, if we go back to that, and again, now even I feel like if the people in the industry aren't careful, that's going to be a normal occurrence, and I'm not going to be okay with that either. But and
then how do you go back from that? How do you go back from that? Because like you said, when is enough? And then it's like, I don't know. I don't have the answer for that. I don't know how it keeps evolving. It will have to maybe devolve a little bit or go backwards a little bit or slow down a little bit, and then you can mix these things together. And I think it'll get there. I think some guys show some of that. I think Daniel Bryan is a good example of that. And Daniel Bryan, what he did with Kenny Omega and showing Kenny Omega looked like he had the most serious wrestling match of his life.
Yes.
With Daniel Bryan, looked like a legit wrestler and still got his things in there. Because he sometimes gets a little goofy or he does his things. I know Jim Cornette has a big problem with him. He hates freaking Kenny Omega for stuff he did before. Whatever, man. Olivier. The guy had his fun back in the day and wrestled some kid or some blow up doll, whatever he did. Whatever. That's back in the day. And I know that they have their fun and they do that sort of thing, but he can go in the ring. You can't hate that. You know, the guy can freaking wrestle. And Daniel Bryan did a great job of bringing that new school mentality and that new school and that element of fighting into wrestling, make it look competitive and still tell a story with it. I think Daniel Bryan does a good job of that.
All right, so we're professional. I mean, Daniel Bryan, of course, we can probably go on and on with names.
Oh, the moves and stuff.
To kind of wrap it up in a nice bow here, I like where professional wrestling is at.
Okay.
I got my problems, clearly.
I do too.
If we talk about here, I got my problem, but I like where professional wrestling is at. Where professional wrestling goes from here, that's really for us to watch and find out, and we can either, you know...
Right, besides the problem... Yeah, besides the problems that I've had, like I said about the moves, you know... Yeah, I like where it's at too because it's fun, and it's competitive, it's fun, it's back and forth. I have no problem with that besides everything else that I said. Now, my question where I was transitioning to earlier, since you said about the moves, right? The moves have evolved, and I want the moves to mean something. And a lot of people I have a problem with nowadays, independent wrestling or even AEW sometimes, even WWE make the moves mean something. We've gotten away from protecting these finishers. Back in my day, and I sound like an old man now, back in my day, we had these shows, weekly shows where the top guys, the Hogans, the Jake the Snakes, the Machos, Mans, were fighting nobodies, you know, just getting their stuff in, being seen. That's what they put out there. you looked forward to Saturday night's main event every couple of months. You looked forward to one pay-per-view every quarter, every 4 months or something like that. You look forward to that pay-per-view. It felt big. They talk about now big match feel, right? Big fight feel, that big match feel like you had recently with Daniel Bryan and Kenny Omega. But do we ever have this big show feel as much as we used to? I remember, and maybe it was because I was a kid, but talk to other people who were adults during that era, or, it's like it started then with these weekly shows, and now you have a 3-hour Raw. Raw is the same amount of time as a pay-per-view. Every damn week we got a 3-hour show that you got to do stuff. So you're going to have the same matches over and over and over again, or when the time you get to a pay-per-view, these guys have already fought, and it's very, very highly unlikely that you have a new match or guys that haven't fought before on Raw or on SmackDown fighting in a pay-per-view. So how do you do that? Even in AEW, they just have one. Well, now they got 2 shows. So how do you do that and make it mean more? I like AEW where they didn't have a pay-per-view every month, but can we go back to that? And does it feel any differently to you? Do you see my point where I'm going with that? Does it feel?
Yeah,
does it still feel big?
I do. I was sitting back just listening to you a minute later. I think it's possible, and to AEW's credit, they've shown that it is possible. Let's look at the build for Punk and Darby. They didn't touch at all. They didn't touch each other at all in that build. So by the time you got to the match, you were hyped to see these two go at it. Now, you can argue, they did with CM Punk because he's CM Punk.
Right.
But they still can do it. WWE shows flashes. They can still do it. Now, granted, it's Roman and Brock. So we know Brock don't compete on TV.
And they fought already 150 times. It's which I have no problem with them doing it again. It's a different environment now. One guy's a heel. Brock Lesnar's the face now. He's not with Heyman. I'm fine with that. I'm cool with that. People who hate it, I don't.
Right.
I disagree. I'm cool with that. But go ahead.
I disagree too. So it's possible. And again, that fall on the creative team and the people who are booking this stuff. And I think with AEW, as I mentioned before, I think one of my problems, I felt they did Kenny versus Bryan too early. Even for their first match, I felt they did it way too early.
I know we kind of disagreed on that. We had that. That's the conversation we had off file. And I'm like, I got your point. This is the beauty of the Lost Art of Conversation, ladies and gentlemen, that I don't have to think that he is an idiot for saying that, or he doesn't think, hopefully, that I'm an idiot for saying what I say. You disagree. You agreed. You disagreed. You wanted to see them in a pay-per-view, build it up. I said, man, I got it, that it was a big show, and they're having, these are kind of like Saturday night main events, quote-unquote, back in the day, or Clash of Champions, where they're having these big moments, and they're capturing that momentum that they had with CM Punk and Daniel Bryan coming in, and I was okay with it with how it ended. If it was a title match, I would have had a problem with it. If it was a title change and Bryan would have been given the title, I would have had a problem with it. I like how they did it. It's just like Bryan came out, hey, let's just fight. Let's give these people what they want, and then they had the match and it was a draw. I was fine with that. So to me, it had to do with the result of it, if I was going to be okay with it or not. You just wanted to wait for it, which I get as well. I understand that point. I do.
Right. So when it comes to a lot of these buildings, I think it's possible. You build it. Yeah, this is where you kind of use the old school element. You build it with promos. You build it with these guys facing other people.
Attacks.
Yep. It's possible. Even Ruthless Aggression Era did that at times. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Even they did it at times. So it's like it's possible.
But how do you do that with TV and you have all these guys? Like, do you bring back some of the squash matches? Being TV now and the ratings out, do you bring that back? I think WWE did that when they're trying to build up. I think it was Ryback squashed a bunch of back in the day. Ryback squashed a bunch of nobodies. Braun did it. Guys like that have done it. Do you bring that back a little more? Do you give? Do you have longer matches so that you can, like, if it's a Seth Rollins versus someone else, Cesaro, and they fought already before, but you give them like freaking half an hour to go, and then you fill it up with a bunch of promos and attacks and stuff like that? Do you? How do you go around that when you have a 3-hour Monday Night Raw?
First off, WWE messed up when they made the show 3 hours on a weekly basis in the first place. Let's start there.
Jesus. I'm glad we agree on that.
That is beyond stupid. I don't remember when hearing a 3-hour special event felt special.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There you go. It's that feeling of something feeling special, and that's I'm like, oh man, it doesn't. It's just another pay-per-view. Okay, it's another pay-per-view. All right.
So WWE killed it. AEW, they still got a chance.
They still have a chance not to kill it. They're doing. I like what they're doing. Like you said, I like that they don't just give all these matches for free. They're giving the younger guys and the other talent like time to shine as well in their shows, and they're spreading spreading the wealth around. It's not just about the Young Bucks and the Elite and that, and now they're on top. But it took a couple of years. They build everybody else up. They build the Darby Allins, the freshly squeezed, Orange Cassidy, the Dark Order. They're allowing the MJF, who's now a main eventer. They build those guys up instead of just taking over the company right away. Now it makes sense for them to be on top, and now it's great with Punk and Bryan there to battle them. That's going to be fantastic. They just have so much talent now that they can get away. They can do that, but I'm just scared that they're going to start giving us all that. Like it's going to be, CM Punk versus Kenny Omega on an episode of Dynamite. I don't want to see that. I want that build for months. Give me like a Kenny Omega versus that for months. And I get why they did it with Bryan, and I'm okay with that. But I also again get your point, and that's because of that. Make it feel special. Make it feel special, man. Let it build up, And I don't know. I don't know how they. I guess that was a good point by you. AEW is doing a good job or a much better job of like WWE doing that, but WWE kind of paint themselves in a corner. They have a 3-hour show every week. You want people to watch, so you can't just give them 3 hours of squash matches. This is not back in the 80s or early 90s. So how do you get around that? I've always asked that question, and I don't know how. How do you get around that? I have no idea.
WWE specifically, I'm assuming?
Yeah, for WWE specifically, or AEW not to fall into that trap if they make like Rampage a 2-hour show, and then you got, hopefully they never make Dynamite a 3-hour show, but if you have that weekly, week in and week out, like what do you do? Like, do you get new guys in there? Do you maybe when you go to these towns, do you give some of the local guys some opportunities, and have them wrestle some of these top guys, and then you have, like you said, a run-in or a promo or something to build up a match. Like, look, Seth Rollins and Edge, what they're doing now. They haven't touched each other again, even though they had the match, but they're building up to their next match. They're not fighting. They're not wrestling.
Right, with their Madison Square Garden match added another chapter.
Right, that's fine. That's fine.
Which is cool.
Yeah, and they already had their first match. Their first one was built up. Their first one was built, and that was great. That was fine.
SummerSlam.
Yeah, that was fine.
So if you're WWE, you really, I don't know how the heck you do this at this point. I don't. Because you shouldn't have made Raw 3 hours in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for SmackDown, you can make an argument of, you can kind of, take some of the people that you got in catering, they ain't really doing nothing.
Right.
And give them that chance, give them a match.
Right, or some guys in the
long, like a 10-minute match, 5-10-minute match.
Right, or some guys that are in developmental that are not even on TV in NXT that are just training, and I don't know. I don't know. I don't have the answer right now because I don't think you can go back to the old formula. All I'm saying is that the reason why I enjoyed that old formula, even though I enjoy seeing good matches on TV every week, but it just doesn't feel special, and I want it to feel big. I want it to feel big time when I'm watching a pay-per-view like these. I'm getting some fresh matches at least, or that it was something built for a few months. I would, if I was WWE, now that you have the net, you had the network, now you got Peacock, like I wouldn't have pay-per-views all the time. I would have just a special edition of Raw, or bring back a Saturday night's main event and save the big shows, the pay-per-views, so that like they have too many damn pay-per-views, or no, they're not technically pay-per-views now, but big shows. It's like it's over. It's like with everything else, it's oversaturated, man. And I'll put this example. I used to collect football cards, basketball cards when I was young, right? That has gone out the window. Like, that doesn't mean it. It didn't mean, even the cards that I collected back in the 90s when I was doing it weren't as big as people who were collecting that back in the 70s or before, or because they started overproducing them, so they didn't mean as much. They didn't cost as much. They weren't a card. I'm gonna have a card that's not as limited because there's so much of it is mass produced. So that's what WWE has done with pay-per-views. It's mass produced. You don't get hyped up for like you would do back in the day, and I don't see how you fix that. And maybe that could be another show. How do we, instead of the Evolution of Wrestling, okay, the Evolution of Wrestling Part 2, how do we now fix the things that we're complaining about, you know? What would be our solutions to it?
One, actually.
Yeah, that'll give us some time to think, man. It'll give us some time
Yeah.
to think. The Evolution of Wrestling Part 2, and we'll get into that. What would we do to do that? Like, bring back, make the moves mean more. What would we do to book these shows to have the matches and big pay-per-views mean more? We could take it from there. What do you think, man?
I
you like that?
legit do want to save that for a different podcast. I'll be down.
No, exactly. That's what I'm saying. You down for that?
Yes. Yes.
All right, so we'll cut it off for today, man. Thank you for joining us here, the Lost Art of Conversation Wrestling Edition, because we got a big part 2 coming up, and me and Boss got to go to the drawing board. We got to brainstorm, and we got to see what we're going to come up with to save professional wrestling. How about that?
Let's get it. I'll be down for it. Thanks for having me on. Until the next time we see you guys, be a boss, and we will holler at you guys later.